I'm Carol Reynolds, and I have the pleasure today of speaking with Maestro Jerry Junkin about an upcoming concert with the Dallas Winds. And as we now find in this marvelous rediscovery, reopening period that we're in, there are new opportunities for repertoire that maybe in the past would not have been on stage. So, Jerry, thank you for spending time with all of us and talk to me about this most interesting program.
Well, thank you, Carol. It's always great to spend some time with you. But yeah, we are really looking forward to it, especially after re-entering the performance realm back in March. Now we get to follow this up. We're still abiding by all of the protocols of the city of Dallas and the Meyerson Symphony Center, meaning we can only have a limited number of players on stage, spaced, of course, and a limited number in the house, 300 max. But nonetheless, we're very much looking forward to getting this concert going. And you're right, it allows us the opportunity to do pieces, or to do pieces in a way in which we would not, in quote, normal times, been able to do them. So we'll start, for instance, with the Canzone Primitoni, a brief piece, about a 5-minute piece for antiphonal brass that'll be up above the stage. 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, Gabriele out of his Sacred Symphony from 1597. I suppose nobody really cares about that except to say this is one of the most important collections of pieces that were ever composed. And it will sound amazing in the Meyerson Symphony Center with these players elevated to get the full antiphonal effect. So we're looking forward to starting the concert with that. And then our wonderful, fantastic, I'm trying to invent new adjectives for our principal bassoonist, Laura Bennett Cameron, who is going to play the Weber Andante and Hungarian Rondo, which is one of the staples of the bassoon repertoire, and in an arrangement with only about 12 players on stage to support her. So there isn't the balance problem that we sometimes run into with the bassoon and larger collections of wind instruments. So those 2 pieces will get the concert started.
Let me ask you, who made that arrangement? Was that something done for this concert, or I know there's a lot of arrangements of this piece for solo, for piano, so where did this arrangement come from?
This arrangement was done many years ago, actually, probably, if I can think, I believe in 1990, believe it or not, by Rick Mitchell, who at the time was a student at UT. And our bassoon professor at that time was going to play this piece with us on a concert. And I was kind of decrying the fact that there are only arrangements for large concert band. And I think the piece is delicate and needs a light support. And this is great because he just said, well, I'll do one. And he did it, and it was brilliant. And I've used it many times actually since then. So it's a wonderful arrangement, wonderful setting.
Great. Okay, well then we've explored 2 very different worlds, and I suppose both of those composers would be astonished, don't you think, Gabriele, to know that he's moved from San Marco to the Meyerson? I mean, again, this time was about this repertoire, despite it being very specific in time and place, and yet here we are, and it's perfect.
I know, and that's the thing about those pieces: Sonata, Piano Forte, Canzone Primitoni, all those great Gabriele brass pieces. They are going to be played as long as there is music, because they just work. And especially when we're able to capitalize on the antiphonal effect in the Meyerson, which is a very rosy, as we say, acoustic. It's not as much as the St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice, but we're getting close. It's the closest that we can do. So I think he actually, I'm using my imagination here, but I think Gabriele would have loved it probably. And Weber probably equally would have loved the Andante and Hungarian Rondo. First of all, he would love the way Laura plays it. I'm certain of that. Yeah. But secondly, I think he would absolutely approve of this little chamber winds adaptation.
Then we move to a guy that everybody loves in the wind world, and he is still one of the biggest names.
That's right. Percy Granger. And what do we call it? Is Granger Australian? Is he British? Is he American? And the answer is yes. He's all of those things. So Granger is one of the foremost, and you're right, most important contributors to what we do. But we're playing 3 little pieces of his. Ye Banks and Braes o' Bonnie Doon, a folk music setting, of course, as all of his pieces are. And then the beautiful Irish tune from County Derry, which so many people recognize as O Danny Boy. And then lastly, the Shepherd's Hay, which is a little clog dance that he set for wind band. So 3 pieces back to back to back, all of Percy Granger, all very familiar pieces, but with smaller instrumentations, obviously. And it's interesting that all 3 of these pieces have always been, from the time that Granger wrote them, adaptable instrumentations. I think you can play Eubanks and Brazel Bonnie Doon with as few as 5 players. So that's just the way he envisioned the work in the beginning. So all 3 of these pieces will work and will be perfectly recognizable in their smaller forms here.
That's wondrous. And then gears shift again to a composer, to a piece that's really, well, we've got several things coming up, but I'm looking in my own mind about a very beautiful work that's almost become a pop tune, the way sometimes so-called classical pieces do. They just show up here and there, and the next thing you know, you hear them in restaurants. This gorgeous Adagio.
Yes, of Joaquin Rodrigo. So Spanish composer who was blind, but a wonderful composer. And this piece, the Adagio for wind instruments, is based on the theme of the second movement of the famous Rodrigo guitar concerto. Which is, that familiar melody is the one that has been usurped, co-opted, however you want to say it, used and in fact has been popularized in movies. There are a number of people who have set words to it, and has become a popular song. So it's based on that theme, but then he does things to it that he didn't do in the guitar concerto. So he takes it in a different direction. But it's a very dramatic, very beautiful work in B minor, which is not the friendliest key for a bunch of wind instrumentalists, but nonetheless, the piece is beautiful. And it has these solos in the opening, beautiful solos for the clarinet, for the flute, for the oboe, that are very reminiscent of the Rimsky-Korsakov Scheherazade. As a matter of fact, people will hear, if you hear someone warming up on these, you'll think, oh, they're going to play Scheherazade, but that's not it. But he interlaces that into this wonderful texture for the Adagio. And our own Dave Leverin has adapted it slightly, because the piece is not a large piece as far as instrumentation to begin with, but Dave has made an adaptable version of it for 16 players that I think is going to really work well. I'm very excited about doing it. It's a great piece.
Well, I know there will be a surprise quintet, which we're going to probably keep for a surprise at this point, and then an incredible piece about Shostakovich that I want to go to in a minute. But I wanted to, you were talking about bassoon a minute ago, and for you all, this is, oh yes, our bassoon. But there's a lot of people in the world that aren't even sure about what a bassoon is and what it brings to an ensemble. And do you mind saying a little more about this? To me, I think it's one of the most extraordinary instruments and sounds ever. Talk about the bassoon, Jared.
I love the bassoon. I'm not a bassoonist, but I'm just telling you, I love the sound of the bassoon, because it's such a versatile instrument. It can make a very reedy, edgy sound when that's called for, and then it can make the most beautiful lyrical sound. And that's one of the interesting things about Laura's playing of the Weber, is that the bassoonist, this is a real sort of a virtuosic showpiece for the bassoonist, because they get to be wonderfully expressive, play with this beautiful sound and make a beautiful line, and then just go crazy at the end from the standpoint of technique. So I love the bassoon. I love the role it plays, which is as a tenor voice, a tenor line. And if you think of a band or an orchestra as having, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, the bassoon in the woodwind family is that tenor line. And you can hear an ensemble play, and if the bassoons aren't in the texture, you just know it. Even though you may not hear that, oh, well, I need a bassoon, but something's missing. But as soon as the bassoon is there, it's undo withoutable. You can't do without it.
Oh, I like the undo withoutable. That's I'm using that.
Okay, please. No credit needed.
Well, again, what I love about these, let's just say, new time programs, where the creativity that we, as you say, we could ordinarily turn to necessarily this particular repertoire, is that you have, again, representing from the late Renaissance with Gabriele, or however you look at his, right on the cusp of changes, to Shostakovich, who really kind of owned a good deal of the 20th century. And another person we don't think of with such brilliance in instrumentation and such crazy fun. What led you to pick this piece?
First of all, it's a great way to end the concert. It's very upbeat. It works itself into a real froth by the end. But Shostakovich is one of those composers. Someone once told me that, there are really only two types of composers. There are the Beethoven composers, the ones who had to just scratch and fight for every note they put on the page and make sketches and throw them away and, you know, uh, ink through things and, wine spills on the manuscripts, all of that. And then there are the Mozart composers, the kind that it just came out of them already perfectly formed in their brain, not big sketch makers, but just they would start at the beginning and write the thing out. That was Shostakovich. Everything was in his head. There's a famous piece, his Festive Overture, that bands play a lot, which is originally an orchestra piece. But one of the great stories is that Shostakovich forgot that he had accepted that commission, and it was time, like the next day. The orchestra was supposed to have it, the parts, the score, everything. So he just sat down at the piano and wrote Festive Overture, and the next day it was to the orchestra as though everything went exactly on schedule. So he was quite a brilliant musician, and this piece is just nothing but fun right from the very first notes. So as the title tells you, folk dances. So it's Russian folk dances, and as I said earlier, they get pretty worked up by the end. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Let me ask you one more question. With the players who are so near and dear to your heart,
Yes.
to everybody in the audience, playing in these, I mean, everybody's thrilled to be back on stage. Everybody's thrilled to be able to go back to concerts, etc. But what do the demands? You take these pieces in their ears. They know some of them in a very big setting. They're spaced out. What are there good things coming out of having to play under these, shall we say, somewhat contrived circumstances? And what's it going to do in their sense of musicianship? What's it require?
Sure, it is different. That's the one thing you say. It's just different. That's all. So you listen in a different way, because now pieces like these three Granger pieces, or the Rodrigo, well, any of these pieces really that we're talking about that exist in larger versions, and that's the way that people have, in most cases, experienced them. In these settings, there's not as much sound information coming, so they'll be able to hear really well, but now they're going to be listening to someone different than what they were accustomed to listening to in the larger scheme of things. So I think it does affect how players will listen, and it makes for the players, it makes it sound fresh. It's not the same version that we've always done with the same players, even though I love that. And I'm sitting next to the same people. It feels so comfortable. Now it's going to be a little bit different. So they have to make adjustments, but everyone is, I think, very excited about the opportunity. As you say, just to be back on stage, just to be back presenting this music again, but B, then to play these pieces in a little bit different way than they or me or anyone else in the audience would have ever heard them.
How do you conduct in the sense of, is there any difference in how you conduct?
I don't know.
Okay, well, you'll tell me that next time then, because
that's a good question. Yeah,
the audience sees your back, so your back will still look like your back, but what the players see always with any conductor is a very different world.
Yes. I will tell you the one thing that's very different from me. And so as a result, I probably, with their permission, won't do it this way. But on the previous concert, that's the first time I had ever rehearsed and conducted with a mask on. And I hadn't realized how much I rely upon my facial expression. So, and this is all covered up. If I'm smiling at a player, they don't see that.
Oh.
Unless my eyes give it away. Or if I'm trying to cue someone and get someone's attention, that's, a mask is hiding half of what my face does. So that's something that I realized if I was breathing with the group to get the show, to help show an entrance, totally, yeah, that was wasted energy, for everyone. So I'm thinking maybe at the concert this time, I don't use a mask if the players are okay with that. I'm separated from them. And also I've been vaccinated. Most of them have been vaccinated, and everyone on stage will have been COVID tested the day prior. That's part of our safety protocols. So that's the one thing that's very much different for me.
Well, that I believe it's interesting you said, because when I was separated by a bunch of states, so I couldn't be there. that
Right.
first concert, but I was watching you, and I've been able to watch you in rehearsal and to sit in the choral terrace, which is always thrilling at concerts. To me, it's the best seat in the house because
Right.
you could feel as if you're, I think I should come in on an entrance or something. It's somewhere, and I'm thinking, goodness gracious, his eyes are always on fire, but boy, they're on fire tonight. You had to do it all with your eyes.
I did feel as though I was having to make up for the loss of, the rest of my abilities there.
Well, there you go. It's been a learning experience for everyone.
Absolutely. It has.
Yep.
And then, our audiences who come to expect a certain traditional ending to the concert will not be disappointed. I'll just leave it at that.
And that if you know this ensemble, you know what that is. And if you're coming for the first time, you will find out, right? How's that? Should we say
Exactly. And I hope that, I know the seating is limited, but it's a wonderful night out. The weather is, becoming spectacular. This is on a Saturday night, so it's not during the week. We don't run into the problems that sometimes weeknights give us. So I really hope that people will join us live and in person for something that we've all been missing for a long time now.
It's going to be a great Saturday night to spend in downtown Dallas with you and the Dallas Winds. And I'm just so glad we could get together to talk about it.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, upward and onward. And
yes.
We'll see you next time. And we want to thank everyone. So many people are a part of making this. And you bring just this magic to it. Maestro Jerry Junkin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.